Welcome back. This is Aquarium Hacks by Marcus. So it's been a little while since I've done a video, but on this video I would just like to simply talk about particularly two groups of cichlids. And you know, this channel of course is not just about hacks. I am also a fish aquarium enthusiast. I have been keeping tanks probably for the last close to 30 years, I would say. So I've kept a lot of fish. I have not kept every freshwater fish in the world or brackish water fish in the world, but I have kept a lot of different types of fish in my lifetime. So I have quite a bit of experience when it comes to aquariums and aquarium fish and things of that nature. But this video particularly is going to be talking about two very popular groups. The first one is more popular than the second one, and the third group we're going to group it in with the first group because they're about the same. So I'm going to be talking about is it better to or is it easier to keep Malawi fish or Lake Tanganyika fish? So we got Lake Malawi and Lake Tanganyika. Now, Lake Malawi and Lake Victoria, which should be explored more, there's just not more of those fish that are available, but they are very similar to the Lake Malawi fish as far as their keep and their attitude and their aggression level. So Lake Malawi and Lake Victoria are very similar. I wish there were more people keeping more Lake Victoria fish since they are a very beautiful fish, very unique in their own right, but because Malawi and Lake Tanganyika are the more popular variety, that's what I'm going to be talking about mostly today. But what I say about Malawi, take it with Victoria as well. So I've kept a lot of Malawi cichlids in my life. Those fish are absolutely awesome. Don't get me wrong about that. I've kept my baboona tanks. I've bred them. I've kept peacock tanks. I've kept hap tanks. Had all kinds of haps, and the haps and the peacocks are very similar. It's just that with the haps, you're going to probably have to get a bigger tank than you would with the peacocks. But peacocks can get actually quite large too, as well as even some of the baboona can also get large. But these fish are relatively easy to keep for the most part. They are their requirements are very simple. You have to have hard water. A pH between 7.5 and 8.4 will do these guys just great. You can have a sandy bottom if you want to. A lot of them do like to dig in the sand, but you don't necessarily have to have sand with these guys. You can actually put rocks in there and they will do just fine with regular pea gravel as well. But sand is their preferred choice of substrate. Most of the baboona cichlids are more highly vegetarian than they are meat-eating cichlids, or so they're kind of you want to feed them a higher concentration of vegetables than you do with meaty things. Now, you can get a good pellet food that you can feed them on a daily basis, maybe like a New Like Spectrum, Northfin, Extreme. I would go for those better quality pellet foods when it comes to those fish. The masoni is really more of a vegetarian fish than the rest of the baboonas are. They really need a high vegetable content in their diet for sure. Very beautiful fish too. Now, some people think that in peacocks, let me just talk about peacocks and haps. They are mainly a predator fish, so they're more omnivore. What I'm trying to say, the ones that eat meat or vegetables, and so they're really easy to feed and really easy to take care of too. But are they really much easier to take care of than Lake Tanganyika fish? That's what I want to come at you with. Now, when it comes to grouping Lake Malawi fish, in most cases you have to overstock those tanks, and because you have to overstock their tanks, that means you're going to have to do more water changes. You're going to have to keep up with your filtration maintenance a little bit more. You're going to have to just work at that tank a a little bit more just to keep it, cleaner, because your levels will get quite out of whack if you don't do that. And those fish really do, for the most part, have to be overstocked because they are very aggressive. I've even found that the peacocks can be very aggressive, just as bad as the mabuna, in my opinion. When you keep them together, they can be very aggressive too, so they need to be overstocked. Haps, not as much, even though they can be aggressive, but they still need a fairly decent heavy stocking level. And you're talking about fish that, for the mabuna, they can get anywhere between 3 and 7 inches. You got some of the bumblebees that have been known to reach up to 8 inches. I think I've seen one that was close to 9 inches. So, you get something large like that. These are not, little bitty small, 2-inch fish. For the most part, you're looking at least on a common basis from 4 to, I would say, 6 inches on a common basis. There are the extreme kinds that do get actually bigger than that. Peacocks, you're looking at, 4 to 7 inches, with peacocks, even 8 or 9 inches, And with haps, well, you're looking at anywhere from 6 to even up to 14 inches. Some haps, that's just on a regular basis. I mean, some haps can even get bigger than 14 inches long. I've seen some running at almost 16 inches long. And so these fish are, quite larger, and they have to be packed in there pretty tight just to keep the aggression lower. And you can't hardly put any plants at all in there with them. You can maybe be able to do that with the peacocks, and maybe the haps get away with that maybe, but just be aware that they do dig, and they will tear up your plants if they just don't want them in their area. So, and with the mabuna, you just can't keep hardly no live plants in there with them at all. A great option would be to use golden pothos or something that hangs in the filter or something like that, or the roots can hang in the water, as they won't mess with those roots. There are a few plants that you can keep with them, but on a most common basis, you just can't hardly keep plants with these Malawi cichlids. Same applies with Victoria too. And so with the upkeep of trying to keep these fish healthy, it can be quite a challenge. And I've noticed too, especially with the mabuna, maybe it was some bad quality that I was getting, some bad stock that I was getting. But with them, I will run into a lot of times the sunken stomach disease, with an internal parasite. Very difficult to treat in those mabuna. And so you can run into that problem as well as a common problem with a lot of African cichlids, with the Malawi cichlids. And so it is some work. They are robust and tough fish, but it definitely has its challenges with those fish. And for the most part, for community fish, at least for the most part, you can just forget about putting any of them with these fish. They're either going to get tore up, or they're going to either be lunch. And so for the most part, not in all cases, but for the most part, you can forget about mixing them with any kind of community fish. And so when you look at the work you got to put into a Lake Malawi tank, even though they're beautiful fish and they got beautiful colors, you look at the work that you got to put into that tank. Are they really easier than taking care of Lake Tanganyika? Now let's talk about Lake Tanganyika, which I have been keeping here lately. Lake Tanganyika again is similar to Malawi. They do require, if you ask me, they'll be okay in 7.5, but they really like it 8 and above 8, even as high as 9 pH. Very hard and very high pH for some of the guys. And if your pH is at 9, it would not harm these fish at all. They will get along just fine in that very hard pH water. And so for the most part, if you got your pH that high, most plants cannot tolerate that high of pH unless you got something like bulbitis or something like that. But if you want to keep plants with them, then you're going to have a little bit lower pH. So you're going to need a pH of at least 8, maybe 8.2. That would be, on the higher end. pH of 7.8 will be fine with Lake Tanganyika. Lake Tanganyika is unique So you normally don't crowd Lake Tanganyika like you do Lake Malawi or Victoria. Usually don't crowd those kind of fish. Those kind of fish are not fish that go in harems and all that kind of stuff. There's so many unique species. It's hard to just talk about one species. One species that you might want to crowd in Lake Tanganyika would be maybe the Tropheus, because they got attitudes like Lake Malawi, like Mabuna. So you might want to crowd those kind of fish together, and that would be fine. And then fish that you don't want to crowd a lot would be like Calvises or Julius chromis. A lot of those guys are the Liupi. A lot of those fish like to be really in their own groups, really. You can have a mixed Lake Tanganyika tank like I got back here, mixing in Australian rainbow fish and different kind of rainbow fish like that, neon rainbow fish. The substrate, for the most part, you really need sand with Lake Tanganyika. They really don't do good with gravel, so unless you got the Calvis or something like that, which doesn't dig. But for the most part, really a sand substrate would be better for them. Once the aquarium is established, their upkeep is really not very difficult at all. And in my opinion, I think they're easier to keep than Lake Malawi cichlids. For one thing, your tank is not going to be overcrowded, so you don't have to crowd in all kinds of fish in there just to curb aggression, because these guys are going to stake out their own territory and they're going to have their own little groups, to themselves, and so they don't really need to be overcrowded. You're not going to, so that's going to cut down on tank maintenance. That's going to cut down on feeding. That's going to cut down on many other different things. And once the tank is well established and the water is stable, there's really nothing to it, because you're not going to be doing really large water changes on this tank anyway. I mean, I do sometimes, this is 127 gallon, and I do like 10 gallons of water change maybe once a week. If I skip a week, I might do like 15, at the most 20 if I skip a week, if I do it every other week. But that's on a 127 gallon tank, so it's not very much water being changed out of that at all. And the fish do wonderful with that. They are cichlids, so you do have to deal with some aggression with Lake Tanganyika cichlids, according to what kinds you got, because Lake Tanganyika can be calm fish where you can keep them with a community of fish, or they could be outright aggressive fish where you can't keep them hardly with any other kind of fish. And so the lake of Tanganyika is so huge and so versatile, it's almost impossible just to give you an exact combination in what to do. But I can tell you about the common ones that you usually find around, or usually online. The Calvis, the compressiceps, you will usually find the shell dwellers, multifasciatus, brevis, ocellatus. You will find the Julius chromis species. You will find the Liupi, and then you find the Bacardi cichlids as well. Now these are just your base common, Lake Tanganyika cichlids, and so setting up a little community tank with this common variety is totally possible, as long as your tank is large enough. They, in most cases, with a species only tank, they do not have to have a very large tank. You can put them in something according to what you got, as small as 10 gallons. For the shell dwellers, all the way up to 300 gallons if you're going to get frontoses or something like that. And so once the tank is established, and I will repeat this, with Lake Tanganyika, they are more sensitive to new water. So you do not want to put them in a freshly cycled tank. Now that's interesting that I said freshly cycled, because that means that a tank is just got through a cycling process and you decide to throw a lot of Lake Tanganyika cichlids in there. You might not have too much of a success. So you want to put them in a well-established cycled tank. And that means that you have had other fish maybe in that tank for some time, that filter's been established for a few months, that you had some snails in there for quite some time. Things have been established for quite a while. Then you decide to take those fish out, and then put the Lake Tanganyika cichlids in. and they do need that. They definitely need well-established tanks, and they need more stable water parameters than Lake Malawi. But once that is established and once that's going well and they know your routine of water changes and they're used to the food that you feed them, they're quite easy actually to take care of. The only downside to Lake Tanganyika, and there are probably two downsides, I would say. They're not very much available at hardly no local fish stores. So for the most part, you're going to have to go to your fish store, ask to get them ordered in, or you're going to have to go online and order them. That's the number one downside. Number two downside to Lake Tanganyika is their price. They, for the most part, are expensive fish for the most part. And number three, I would say this too for the downside. They don't grow as fast as like Lake Malawi and Victoria cichlids. So those are three downsides to Lake Tanganyika. And if you want to throw in a number four downside, they're for the most part they're not as colorful per se, but their personality and what they do and how the tank is set up and all the other interesting things that they have, in my opinion, outweighs the color factor of Lake Malawi. And because of the Lake Tanganyika personality and what they do and how they do things is just awesome. And there are quite a few colorful Lake Tanganyika cichlids as well. So those are the only downsides I would say to Lake Tanganyika. The downside to Lake Malawi, I would say, is actually Mabuna and peacocks can be quite expensive as well, according to what size you get. So there's a downside. Another downside is because these fish are so widely available and they're always being bred. A lot of them are inbred, which causes poor health quality, which causes you to buy more medication and things of that nature. And so because they're so widely available, there's so many of them, and there's so many mixes of them, their health is just not as great, in my opinion, or not as good as most Lake Tanganyika cichlids are, because of that reason. Another downside is you have to overcrowd them, and so you just that's going to cause more tank maintenance and more work for you. Another downside is in most cases you cannot use hardly any live plants with them, and so you can just hang that up. And another downside, number 5, as you can't mix hardly no other community fish in with them hardly, without those community fish getting really beat up bad. So there are some downsides definitely to Lake Malawi and Lake Victoria as well. And there are some downsides to Lake Tanganyika as well. But as for me and the fish that I've been keeping over the years, especially African cichlids per se, the Lake Tanganyika tank has been by far the best tank that I've ever have kept, and I don't have any intent of ever changing these guys out. I mean, I've always had intent of changing, Malawi cichlids out. You just get, tired of them or just want to change something different. These guys, I have not been bored or tired of these guys at all. They're just really just a mainstay fish for me, as far as I'm concerned. And so those are the upsides and downsides to it. Of course, maybe on my next video, this one's extremely long, one of my longest videos, but on my next video I'm going to, of course, talk about another group of fish, and that'll be the South American and the Central American cichlids that I have kept those in times past too, and those are some awesome fish. Now that's a whole nother category. You're talking about Central and South American fish. And so I just wanted to talk a little bit of fish talk to you today. And if you have time, down in your comments, tell me the group of fish that you like to keep. It don't necessarily have to be cichlids. It could be guppies, platies, shrimp like I got over here, betta fish, whatever is on your mind. And hey, just keep on hacking.